What's up? Welcome to Crash Course AP American Government, Part 2. Front-loading. This is a practice of moving presidential primary elections to the early part of the campaigns to maximize the impact of these primaries on the nomination. Currently, New Hampshire has the first primary because it's written into state law, but many states are moving theirs earlier to days like Super Tuesday, where up to 1/3 of a convention's votes can be had. PAC versus Super PAC. A PAC is a type of organization that pulls campaign contributions from members and donates these funds to campaign for or against certain candidates, initiatives, or legislation. A super PAC is a special type of PAC, and they can raise unlimited sums of monies from corporations, unions, associations, and individuals that a PAC cannot. Then they can spend these unlimited sums of money to advocate for or against political candidates. Hard money versus soft money. Soft money is unprotected by the FECA, the Federal Election Campaign Act, and under this, party organizations have the right to unlimited, untrackable, independent spending. It can't be traced by the FEC. Hard money, however, is raised and spent under FECA's limitations, and the Federal Elections Commission can take a look at it. Super-delegates. Super-delegates are party leaders and elected officials who become delegates to the National Convention without having to run in primaries or caucuses beforehand. They have special voting privileges in the Democratic Party, but Republicans don't have it. Spin. Spin is a form of propaganda achieved through a deliberate biased interpretation of an event, or campaigning to influence public opinion about organizations or different public figures. This is often used to portray candidates in a negative light to influence the election. Appropriation. Appropriation is a legislative grant of money to finance a government program or agency. Congress has been authorized to spend this money by Article 1 of the Constitution. There are many different types of committees in Congress. One type is a standing committee. This is a permanent committee established in the legislature, and it focuses on a broad policy area. Select committees are temporary committees established for a limited period of time for a special purpose, such as passing legislation. A joint committee is a committee composed of members from both the House and the Senate. Such committees oversee the Library of Congress and also help to conduct investigations. A conference committee is appointed by the presiding officers from each chamber to adjust differences on a particular bill that's passed by each in different form. Their job, in essence, is to iron out the differences. A Rules Committee is a standing committee of the House that provides special rules under which specific bills can be debated, amended, and considered by the House. They are like the police. Earmarks are funding appropriations that are specifically designated for a named project in a member state or district. Representatives want to slip in earmarks in bills to garner support from their constituents. The filibuster is a procedural practice in the Senate, where a senator refuses to give up the floor and talks nonstop. Through this, they can delay proceedings and prevent a vote on a controversial issue, and these can last up to days, during which time the person cannot use the restroom or eat. Cloture. This is a procedure for terminating debate, and it's especially useful in the Senate for terminating filibusters. Gerrymandering. This is the process of redrawing legislative boundaries for the purpose of benefiting the party in power. It was named after Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry when he decided to draw a district in a weird shape, like a salamander, to keep his party in office, hence the name gerrymander. Logrolling is an arrangement in which two or more members of Congress agree in advance to support each other's bills. This is like that game of log rolling. As long as both participate and help each other, everything will be good. Oversight is the process by which Congress follows up on laws it has enacted to ensure that they are being enforced and administered in the way Congress intended. Most often, this occurs through congressional hearings, where knowledgeable people are brought in to testify. Reapportionment is the allocation of seats in the House to each state after each census. This year's 2020 census will no doubt allow the House seats to shift to states with rising populations, especially in the American South. Northern areas will start to lose seats as they deindustrialize and jobs go to the South. Redistricting is the redrawing of the boundaries of the congressional districts within each state. Sometimes during redistricting, gerrymandering occurs as groups try to redraw districts based on populations that will be favorable to their party. Presidential powers. There are two main ones that are important to know. One is the executive order. This is a rule or regulation issued by the president that has the effect of law. Executive orders can be implemented and give administrative effect to certain provisions in the Constitution, to treaties, and to statutes, and through this they can bypass the bureaucracy in Congress. Executive privilege is the right of executive officials to withhold information from or refuse to appear before a legislative committee if asked. Nixon tried to claim executive privilege over his tapes. Bully pulpit. This is the president's use of his or her prestige and visibility to push an agenda or enthuse the American public, and it was coined by Theodore Roosevelt, who really thought this platform was great for putting his message out to everybody else. Veto. This is a formal decision by the president to reject a bill that's passed by Congress. It shows the power of checks and balances because this gives the executive branch more power if the legislative branch starts to have too much power. State of the Union is the president's annual statement to Congress and the nation. It's given in the House chambers, and usually all the important people in government are attending. Impeachment is an act by the House of Representatives to accuse the president, vice president, or other civil officers of the United States of committing treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Only 3 in the history of the United States have been impeached: Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. And these usually happen during very partisan times. Nixon, as you may remember, resigned before he could be impeached. War Powers Resolution. This was a law passed in 1973 that spelled out conditions under which a president can commit troops without prior congressional approval, and it occurred during the Vietnam War era because sometimes it was just easier to take extreme action rather than go through government bureaucracy. The Iron Triangle is a 3-way alliance between legislators, bureaucrats, and interest groups to make or preserve policies that benefit their respective interests. Most legislation goes through this before it can actually become a reality. An issue network is a group of individuals or organizations that may consist of legislators, legislative staff members, interest group leaders, bureaucrats, and the media, scholars, and other experts in a certain field. And together, they form a particular policy position on a given issue. They will often bind together and form a coalition to better pool their resources. The Pendleton Act was an act that was established to maintain the principle of employment on the basis of merit. It created the Civil Service Commission to administer the personnel service and establish a merit system in government where people were hired based on their skills. And it was established after the Civil War, so those in power couldn't just abuse an office by keep handing out positions to their friends or donors. Stare decisis, also known as let the decision stand, talks about precedent. It's when courts generally follow the decisions of lower courts or previous cases in similar cases that actually set a precedent for future cases. The writ of certiorari, this is also known as a writ of cert, and it's an order that's issued by a higher court to a lower court to send up the record for a case of review. And this is required before a case can make it to the Supreme Court of the United States, because of course the Supreme Court is an appellate court. People are appealing to it. You can't directly just have your first trial there. Judicial activism. This is a doctrine holding that the Supreme Court should take an active role by using its powers to check the activities of governmental bodies when those bodies exceed their authority. So one case of this was in Brown versus Board of Education, as the court decided to start and end segregation in public schools. Judicial restraint, on the other hand, is a doctrine that the Supreme Court should defer to the decisions made by the elected representatives of the people in the legislative and executive branches to follow stare decisis. And one example was Plessy versus Ferguson, as it upheld the separate but equal standard established earlier. The Rule of 4 is a United States Supreme Court procedure by which 4 justices must vote to grant a petition for review if a case is to come before the full court. Amicus curiae brief. This is known as a front of the court brief, and it's filed by an individual or organization to present arguments in addition to those that are already presented by intermediate parties in a case, and it helps to assist the court. The Supreme Court usually requires one of these to be filed before a case can be heard. Political efficacy talks about an indication of a citizen's trust in government and their own belief that he or she can understand and influence the political affairs. Low political efficacy usually sucks because people aren't involved in democratic processes such as voting. A litmus test is an examination of the political ideology of a nominated judge. Robert Bork failed this test and he got borked, so he could not become a judge because his ideas were just too crazy, or maybe his personality was. The majority opinion is a signed statement that presents the view of the majority of the Supreme Court justices regarding a case. On the other hand, we have the dissent, which is the losing side's opinion. The rule of law is a set of procedures in which all people are treated equally and consistently under the law. It states that no one is above the law. This is essential to our democracy. Devolution is the transfer of powers and responsibilities from the federal government to the states. Proponents of limited government favor this because they believe people on local levels can judge and make the best decisions. Popular sovereignty is a belief that the ultimate power resides in the people. This was a huge concept out of the Enlightenment era and gave rise to the democracy that we see today. There it is. A referendum is a process by which a policy issue, amendment, or constitution is sent to the voters for approval. In this case, direct democracy is taking place because voters can directly vote on issues and not have to rely on their representatives to make decisions for them. Grassroots. This is from the bottom up, and ideas work up from common citizens to the people in power. Grassroots movements take the most effort and don't always have a ton of money behind it. However, they do have the power of the people, and thus can be equally as powerful. A realigning election is an election during periods of expanded suffrage and change in the economy and society that proves to be a turning point. There were many redefining elections over the years, and the agenda of politics and the loyalty of voters usually shifted within the party or to different parties. The incumbent is the current holder of elected office. The 90% rule applies here, where 90% of incumbents win re-election in the House of Representatives. The motor voter law is an act that was designed to reverse declining voter registration by allowing voters to register at motor vehicle departments. However, it's only been mildly successful. Turnout is still an issue, ultimately, on Election Day. The lame duck period is a time when focus shifts away from a politician that was sitting in office after having lost a really bad election or is nearing a certain term limit. Herbert Hoover had it real bad when he lost election to FDR and couldn't do anything to stop it during the Depression times. Entitlements are benefits guaranteed by the law to individuals who meet certain basic requirements. These could include things like Social Security and welfare. Once given, they are hard to take back and often represent a big drain on the budget. Well, that's it for this one. Part 3 is over here on the left, and you can find the full playlist over there on the right. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.